Hello, fairy finders and fairy seekers. Welcome to FaerieQuest and part 2 of the Tower Rock series of Real Fairies in Real Photos. I'm sorry for the delay in part 2 here. However, I ended up getting sick. So if during this video you hear a little bit of frog in my throat, I apologize ahead of time. I would love it if you would comment through the video and also like the video. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up and also subscribe if you haven't done so already. There's more goodies on the way. So here goes part 2 for you. I believe we may have a fairy from the dwarf species here, though that statement is not written in stone. We see a pointed green hat, eyes, nose, an ear, and a longer brown beard. It was actually the brown beard that caught my attention, and then the ear. This fairy is wearing green, which I believe he did intentionally, as he may not have the ability to blend the way some other fairies do. It is not a perfect match to the leaves, but it would certainly do the trick as long as someone wasn't scrutinizing photos. Would we say this fairy might be from some kind of mud species? He looks perfectly at home in the mud, not at all worried about anything that might be in the mud or underneath him where he can't see. We see eyebrows, eyes, an ear, a nose, a chin, and a bit of a neck curve on the left side as we look at him. He was apparently keeping a very good covert eye on me as I took this picture. I'm not sure what I would have thought or how I would have reacted if I had seen him with the naked eye looking at me from the mud. Tree fairy or a fairy blending with the tree? It is difficult to miss the yellow eyes and the hand with the fingers. If you look closely, you will even see a tongue sticking out right below the rounded portion of the face under the eyes. We definitely cannot fault this fairy if this is a blend job, as it is perfect with the bark of the tree. The unseen realm has some very interesting characters and so many mysteries. I actually missed these two in my first sweep of this photo, though I don't know how, as they stand out quite well. We have here what I believe is an elder gnome or perhaps a grandfather to the little girl next to him, who looks as though she has lots of questions that need answering. I can almost hear her chirping along non-stop as they walk through the woods together. We are seeing them both in profile. He is a bit bent over, so his nose and mouth are hidden by the leaves. We can see his coned hat, his ear, one eye, and I believe he has a mustache. There is probably a beard too that we can't see. This is a cute little human-looking fairy, though I shouldn't be so certain of the human part, since we cannot see all of his head due to the darkness. It is also often hard to tell if they are children or adults due to their size. We see this fairy peeking through the leaves. Part of his face and head is obscured by the leaves, but we can still see an ear, eyes, and part of a nose. Compare him to the size of the leaves. If he is able to hide within them, he has to be small, right? Here we see a fairy, F-A-I-R-Y, blending herself with the tree and the sunshine. If it weren't for the sunshine, we would not be seeing her wings, her skirt, or her legs. She would just look like a tree marking. I believe she has her hand over the lower part of her face, so we can just make out her eyes above it. We can see her forehead and dark hair. She is wearing a dark shirt with a white collar. It seems we may have another witch, W-I-T-C-H, fairy here, only this one does not have the green face and hooked nose. We can see her black conical hat and her face in profile, but nothing else. She has a kindly face and appears to be quite young. This fairy looks like a very jovial and caring lady. We can see her hair in a bun and her face and facial features quite well. This includes her ear and part of her neck. However, anything beyond that is a bit confusing. I believe she is caring for young fairies, but it is hard to piece together due to the light and shadow. She looks like she really loves her work. Two fairies here. One is sitting up, top left arrow, and the second is lying down with his face resting on what appears to be a mushroom. This is an odd pair, and we can't really make out the body of the resting fairy. The other fairy looks like he is getting a kick out of how the other fairy is resting. Notice they are both above the fairy I showed you in the previous frame. Another little fairy on the same tree as the ones in the last two frames. This little one looks to be a bit cranky in comparison to a couple of the others. I wonder if he is playing lookout or is a bit cranky that others are getting the attention of the jovial lady. He's kind of cute in his own little way, but again, it is difficult to tell whether he is child or adult. What would be your guess? Not sure why this fairy is out in the middle of what seems like nowhere to us, but we can see him quite clearly. He is wearing a hat and his face is quite pale. In fact, that is what gave him away. We can see his eyes, nose, and mouth, and if you look really closely, you will see he is wearing glasses. His ear is also easy to see. He may be meeting with the witch, W-I-T-C-H, fairy that you saw in the first video of this series. I have pointed her out in the photo to the left using an arrow. Well, look at this fuzzy guy using the sunshine to make himself seen on the trunk of the tree. We see dark eyes joined with zigzaggy eyebrows and a round nose. We can also make out a belly and one leg and foot. Even though he looks grumpy, he's actually pretty cute. Another very small fairy that was hard to enlarge, so it is a bit blurred. Still, we see this fairy from tip of hat to toe. The facial features are obscure, but the hat is clear. The belly is clear, and we can see one leg and foot. Also, if you look closely, this fairy is, I believe, waving at someone. The arm and hand that are waving blend up into her face and hat. Sometimes we come across fairies that blend so well into their surroundings that we have to really pull back and take it all in. This fairy appears to be made out of leaves, but I don't think he is. He has set himself down under leaves, and in the picture, these could be taken as hair, but it's not. His face is clear, especially his eyes and an eyebrow. We cannot see his neck or upper body, but we do see his legs. One leg is bent under the other, and the legs are the same color as the hair that isn't hair. This fairy was so clever. We can see 1 foot too. First thing I thought of when I saw this fairy was a superhero. Maybe it was the cape he is wearing, or perhaps it is the fact that he is suspended above the water. It could also be the dark sunglasses over his eyes. If he is a superhero, he's been at it for a long time. As we can see, he has gray hair and a gray beard. Here we have another fairy that looks to be made of leaves. He did try to hide, but wasn't quite successful in his blending. We see his eyes, his hooked nose, part of his mouth, and his curly arm. We can also see a portion of his hair flattened against his head under the leaf. He appears to be either a bit worried or very sad. At least that is what I am seeing from his expression. Sometimes fairies appear in or as the light. In this case, this fairy looks to be an elder with long hair and a thick beard. He appears to have his hands up to his mouth as though praying. His clothing is not fancy, and it is hard to tell if he is barefoot or wearing an open-toed sandal. He has chosen to be the light and has blended that light with the tree trunk. It is an incredible photo. Do you see the 2 hairy fairies standing side by side against the bark of the tree? They may very well be a couple. It looks as though his face is not as hairy as hers, as we can see the flesh color of his long nose and part of his face. Her face appears to only show the white of her eye and something around her mouth location. They almost appear to be standing at attention. This fairy really does seem to be a part of the tree. However, his nose says that he is not just our imagination. The bark on this little one is different than the bark on the tree, with the hair flowing in long strips. Plus, his nose is clear, as is his eye that currently appears as an empty dark socket. He is also holding up one arm, and I believe he was waving. I cannot even begin to venture a guess as to what kind of fairy this is. To me, it resembles a fish in a way, but the water you see it in was not even deep enough to get an entire foot wet. This means it wasn't deep enough for a fish. The glowing eyes are a bit startling, as is the open mouth. Of course, I can see other things in this one as well, which is why I can't give you any more than what I've written here. Any guesses? Rocks are definitely the friends of these fairies, as they can blend into them with no problem. We can see this fairy face in flesh color. The way his lips are pursed, he may even be whistling. We can see his hat, his face with eye, nose, and whistling mouth, but we can't see much else here. This fairy is another tiny one, so making him larger only makes him blur. Okay, so that's it for part 2 of this Tower Rock 3-part series. I am working on part 3 already, so please be patient with me as I work to get that done. I hope you enjoyed this video. Until the next one, take care.